Innovation is not technology necessarily. Innovation is just changing the way we do something to get a better result. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of the Beyond the Balance Sheet podcast. Today I'm joined by Bassingthwaighte and Sarah Schubert from our office, and we'll be recapping some insights from our leadership conference that we attended in the Philippines earlier in the month. We're now joined by Lisa and Sarah. Welcome, Lisa and Sarah.
Thanks.
Lisa and Sarah and I had the opportunity to travel over to the Philippines in the first part of December for two reasons. The first part was to attend a leadership conference that was hosted by TOA Global, Nick Sinclair and his team, and we were very fortunate to hear from a number of world-class speakers, to be perfectly honest. TOA Global support our team that are based overseas in the Philippines, Anel, Arlen, Dave and Joe. So the first part of our trip we spent at the leadership conference on the beautiful island of Boracay. And then from there we travelled up to Clark, where our team's based, to spend some time training the team and to generally hang out and attend their Christmas party. So it was a very productive trip, and what we'd like to do today is just to share some of the insights that we got from the conference, again, from the amazing speakers, and really to talk a little bit about how certain quotes resonated with us and how we can bring that back for our own life inside the office that we can share with clients, but also a lot of tips that we can use at home as well. So I'll start with you, Sarah, and I think the first quote we might start with is, "If you can, you must."
So that quote came from Emma Carey. So her story was really interesting, and she sort of started the conference. We all had to close our eyes and get ourselves grounded, and then she sort of spoke through what she had gone through, which was, so when Emma was 20, she fell 14,000 feet during a skydive and survived. So the way she sort of explained it was, she went out to do something really exciting and adventurous. It was something that a lot of people all want to do in their lifetime, but it quickly became her worst nightmare when the free fall didn't stop. So she felt the parachute deploy, slowing them only slightly, and then without even knowing anything about skydiving, she knew that they were falling far too fast. The next thing she remembers is lying face down on the ground with an unconscious instructor strapped to her back, and when she tried to roll him off, she had the most brutal realisation of her life. She couldn't move her legs at all. So over the next several years, Emma slowly learned to walk again, which is an extraordinary achievement, although she still lives with permanent paralysis.
Yeah, so that's a bit of background of Emma. As you can probably imagine, the room fell deathly silent when we were all, as you said, had our eyes closed, imagining what she went through. But the quote there, I'd probably like to focus on the quote and how she came to that, or how she came to the realisation that that's the way that she was going to live her life now.
Yeah, so obviously she has woken up, I don't think she ever became unconscious, but yeah, so she's fallen to the ground, realised that she can't move her legs, and then obviously the next few months are quite a struggle. So this happened, I don't know if I mentioned it, but it did happen in Switzerland. She's an Australian, so she was far away from family. She was actually there with her best friend, who sort of came in afterwards and came running over quite excited that they'd done this amazing thing, and actually didn't realise that her best friend had just fallen and was critically injured. So the next few months was, a path of recovery, and she spoke about how hard that was for her mentally. Her entire life had changed. She was a runner, she now couldn't even walk. And there's all these things that as a young 20-year-old particularly, you realise that you can't do anymore. So she sort of spoke about that and how that weighed on her mental health quite heavily. That was quite negative. And then she sort of spoke about a story where she was sitting with another fellow paraplegic. They were talking about happiness, and she said that their conversation was talking about, I'll be happy when, and he had said, I'll be happy when I can walk again. And she said the realisation dawned on her that if that's something that you're sort of waiting for and basing your happiness on, and that never happens, does that mean you'll never be happy again? And she said that was a real big turning point in her shift in perspective. And we all do it. We all say, I'll wait for this time to come before I'll do this. I'll wait for X to happen and then I'll do Y. But why are we waiting? If you can, you must. So yeah, it was quite incredible, and it was really confronting hearing it that way. And you know, we don't really realise how lucky we are in that perspective.
Yeah, and I think that became a little bit of a catch cry for the rest of the trip. Then, you know, I said, I might go to the gym, and Sarah would pipe up and go, if you can, you must. So, and after hearing Emma's story, that's a good attitude to have. And I think, you know, in our business life and also in our personal life, let's not put those things off and wait for a better day. If you can do it now, let's do it now. And probably the story of Emma, it goes a little bit further than that, in that, as Sarah mentioned, she's a paraplegic, so no feeling from the waist down, but she was fortunate enough to be able to teach herself how to walk. And you know, prior to the accident, she was a runner. She's unable to run because she doesn't have any, she can't move her calves, so she can't go up and down on her toes. But I think it was earlier this year, Emma completed the New York Marathon because as a runner that was a goal of hers to do, and going back to her mantra, if you can, you must. And she had got herself to a point where she could do it. She didn't run the marathon, obviously, she walked it, but she did it. So we got to see a few of the footage from her completing that marathon. And I think everyone after that sort of, you know, walked away with a sense of perspective in one sense, but also, you know, to take on that challenge. If you can do something,
yeah,
then
and
you
I
must.
think that was the point with the marathon. It was, you know, we all think when you think of a marathon, it's, you know, you're running it, but maybe that's not the only way to do something. You can, why not walk it? So that was a good way to think about things. Is, you know, just because you think there's a certain way things need to be done, it doesn't mean it's the only way it can happen.
Yeah.
I also think that the message still is not only an internal message that if you can, you must, is about encouraging others to see the opportunity where they may be kind of scared to take on the challenge, and see those opportunities for others, and sort of push everyone to do the things they might feel uncomfortable doing.
Very good. So I'll hand over to you, or go over to you now, Lisa. Was there a quote there that sort of resonated with you?
I might start with Dom. So Dom Thurbon is a change resilience strategist. So without radical transformation, 50% of leaders believe their companies could vanish within the next 10 years. To secure your position during this unprecedented wave of disruption, former EY assurance partner and creator of multi-award winning behaviour change programs impacting over 50,000 people annually, Don Thurbon will guide you through trends poised to reshape business sectors and society, with practical ways to remain resilient in the face of rapid change. Dom reveals why leaders lie and why recommitting to the truth is important in critical times.
So what part of Dom's presentation resonated with you, Lisa?
Dom's presentation was really interesting. I mean, because it's really talking about truth and lie, and as I think as a human, we assume our intent is always to be truthful. Mine certainly is, but there are varying from his presentation. We've got interpretation of truths that are occurring, simultaneously. My truth's not the same as your truth, or your truth, or the truth potentially. It's shaped by perspective, environment, and all the other factors around us.
Yeah, and he spoke about a few interesting stories. One being the rise of Domino's in the mid-2000s.
Yeah, that was a really interesting story. It actually had us pick or vote for which company out of it. I think we had 7 or 8 companies logos up on the screen. So Tesla, Apple, Domino's, and he wanted us all to guess which one would have had the highest rise in stock price from there to now. I don't know if anyone here picked Domino's, but I didn't.
Picked Amazon.
Who'd you pick?
Of course I picked Domino's.
I picked Tesla.
No.
Anyway, the truth is it was actually Domino's, and I think the whole room was surprised at that story. And where it came from is that back in the 2000s, Domino's were performing terribly. Their stock price was so low. Customers hated their product, complaints everywhere. The crust is soggy, the toppings yuck, like the horrendous public opinion about the product, and so there was no morale. Nobody liked it until the CEO at the time started, printing up the reviews that were terrible and plastering them all over the workplaces. Our crust is bad. What else did you say? It was horrific. So it's all of your normal social media slagging now. And then he took out an ad campaign, and he basically got on the ad and just apologised to the customers. He told the truth. He said, "We know our pizzas are really terrible. We're sorry. We're going to do something about it." And with that came sort of radical change within their organisation. Employees sort of felt better. Customers felt better, and their stock price rose. People went back to buying their product because not only did he tell the truth, and he told it publicly, didn't shy behind the fact that they were terrible. They changed the product and they changed where they sat in the market. So it was really kind of impressive story on what it really means and what change can happen when you're truthful.
Yeah, and I love that you talked about the employees and customers buying into that truth, because that was probably one of the things you talked about the most, was it's the leadership piece in that. And if your leaders are telling lies and you're accepting that, then we're all buying into that. Whereas if our leaders, if we're trying to put the onus back on our leaders to be a bit more truthful, we can all buy into that, and we're all doing a similar thing. We're all sort of doing a bit more truth telling as opposed to, well, they're lying, so I'm going to lie, and we all just fall into this spiral.
Yeah, you mentioned the advertising campaign, Lisa. That was a halftime ad at the
Super
Super
Bowl.
Bowl. So probably the most expensive piece of television in the world.
Most expensive apology.
And that was the most expensive apology. And he was a newly appointed CEO, so he came in without baggage, and we learned a little bit about the difference between baggage and experience, and they're actually the same thing. But he came in and basically, as you said, apologised to the world, primarily the US market. And by doing that, he said that they were going to change. More importantly, he did deliver that change. So they did redo their recipes. They changed the way they made their pizzas.
And they built trust.
But they built trust. But within sort of, I think, the first month of that ad, their sales went up by 14%. Now, they hadn't made any of these changes yet. They had a spike in sales because he owned up to the truth. And I think that, as you said, is a really important point. Unless you're truthful to yourself, then you're not going to be able to progress. And that's a really important part of leadership. The other interesting thing, I'll try and quickly share this story, but it goes a little bit to leadership as well, that Dom spoke about. And he spoke about a British paediatric surgeon who operates on hearts of young kids. Dr. Martin Elliott, I think his name. I apologise if I got that wrong. But he was the preeminent surgeon in the UK, and from the time that he'd finished in the operating theatre to the time that the patient got to the intensive care ward, there was a 33% or 30% chance that the patient wouldn't make it. So they'd survived the surgery okay, but they didn't survive the transition. And the transition was effectively from one team to another. So the team in the theatre to the team on the ward, basically. And the professor, I think he's a professor, the professor and a colleague were sitting on the lounge in between surgeries, taking a break, and they were watching the Formula One, and they sort of had their light bulb moment whereby they were observing the pit crew in a Formula One race. And for those that are Formula One fans out there, I probably don't need to explain this, but when a car comes into the pits, it will get 4 new tyres, they might do a couple of adjustments to the wings, and then it's out back in the race again. And that, on average, takes about 2.5 seconds. And as part of that job to service that vehicle in the pit, there's somewhere between sort of 16 and 20 people that are part of that process. The professor had this idea that that's what we need to do. We need that sort of teamwork and leadership when we're transferring our patients from the theatre to the ward. Then he knew the chief medical officer at the time at Formula One, who put him in touch with the McLaren Formula One team, and then who subsequently went from McLaren and did some work with Ross Brawn. Again, for those that are Formula One fans will know who he is. I won't go into it, but again, a leader in that field. And basically what they did is they got the Formula One engineers and the pit crew to come in and analyse their procedure from taking the patient from the theatre to the ward. So they did that, they spent a number of weeks going through that and came back with 47 recommendations of how they should change their procedure. But it was through the lens of a Formula One team which was focused on the process rather than a medical team which was focused on the care. So what they did was they adopted all 47 of those recommendations. And the main one being was that during that whole process, there was no leader. Everyone in the team of 20 that was transitioning the patient from one area to the other had a specific job, but no one was coordinating it. They were just all doing their own things. There was no clear communication. There was no leadership. So, and again, getting back to the Formula One analogy, the leader in the pit crew is the guy that tells the driver when he can go. And nothing else happens until that person, the leader, says, you're right to go. So one of the key recommendations was to have a leader. So they were able to put that into practice, and the survival rate went from, the mortality rate went from 30% to 0. Which is amazing.
It's incredible.
Absolutely amazing. And clearly that's the most important thing, but I guess a side benefit from that was they were also able to reduce the transition time from an hour to about 50 minutes. So there was also a time saving in doing that, but obviously the most important thing is that they're actually saving lives in the process. And probably the thing that resonates to me is the importance of leadership in that scenario and being part of a team and knowing your role. For each wheel on a Formula One car, there's one person to undo it, there's one person to take the old wheel off, one person to put the new one on, and the next person to do it back up again. So 3 people on each wheel, but they all know their specific role, and together they can service a car in sort of 2.5 seconds. And I think that's important if you go back to your own business and have a look at processes, and we'll talk a little bit about innovation shortly. But look at the process. Make sure the process is clearly defined, but there's also a clear leadership structure in going about it.
I think too, when you encourage your team to be truthful, it can actually open up a lot of opportunity for change and improvement. As a leader, if you're allowing us and everybody else in the organisation to speak up and provide feedback, genuine, there's opportunity like that. They sort of put their hand up and said, we are the best at what we do, but we can't do this well. Yep. Who can we ask to sort of fix this for us, or at least listen to what their opinion is? And whilst telling the truth sometimes at lower levels can be difficult, there's actually power in that, I think.
That's a pretty good segue into innovation, which again, something that Sarah resonated with throughout the conference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so James O'Loughlin, he was a speaker as well as the MC for the entire event, so he was there every day sort of introducing TOA Global as well as the speakers, but he also did a keynote. So James O'Loughlin is a television and radio host, an author, and one of Australia's most respected and entertaining corporate speakers. He's best known as the host of over 300 episodes of The New Inventors on ABC TV and for his programs on ABC Local Radio. He regularly speaks about how innovation happens and helps organisations become more innovative.
Just run with it.
Yeah. So he talked about innovation, efficiency, and probably our natural tendency to just repeat the same things over and over again. The quote I loved, and I feel like I'm going to use this with clients all the time, was to harvest frustration and use it as an opportunity to do things better. And I know you and I met with some clients yesterday and sort of talked about that, and the key word that came out of our client's mouth was, it's just so frustrating And I was like, bang, there it is. So really the story behind that is if something's frustrating you, it's really a good opportunity to think, is there a better way to do this? And I know we often think a better way at the moment, we're sort of using technology for the most part in terms of doing things better, but it doesn't have to be that far either. It can be a system, a process, a person. There's a number of ways that things can be done better. But yeah, it's really just that mindset of something's frustrating you, then yeah, we can certainly try and find a better way of doing that. And the example he used was the check-in process at a hotel. He was, we've all been there, we're standing there, we're excited, we're on a holiday, we just want to get in there and start enjoying it. And yeah, the line was so long, and he thought there's got to be a better way of doing this. And so yeah, I think going forward now, particularly for myself, it's if something's frustrating me, then yeah, maybe there's a better way to do it.
Yeah, and I think there was James's presentation again, like all the others, was excellent, and I got a number of different things out of it. And I think you touched on it a little bit. Innovation is not technology necessarily. Innovation is just changing the way we do something to get a better result. And as you said, that could be adding an extra person to the team. Or I was trying to think of an example this morning, but where we've seen innovation without technology. And to be honest, I was struggling a little bit. But the one thing that I could think of is the way that we get fuel. So service stations have innovated, and probably Lisa and Sarah are too young to remember when
That's very kind.
when you used to go to the petrol station and someone would fill up your car for you, and you'd hand them the money, and they'd go in and get your change, and off you go. You didn't even have to get out of your car. But nowadays, what happens, as we know, I guess service stations have innovated, they've cut costs. Whether the customer experience is as good as it used to be, that's up for debate. But what they've done is they've changed a process where people now get out of their cars and go inside. So rather than having an attendant on each Bowser, they've got one behind the till. Now, from a business point of view, that allowed them to reduce costs. Again, what does it say about the customer experience? Well, we all do it, and you guys didn't even know that the old way existed. So that was my really poor attempt to try and think of an example of innovation without a technology change. Most forms of innovation do involve some technology, and more recently AI, which we've spoken about earlier. So that sort of that resonated with me as well. And there are a couple of others. One is that you need to disrupt yourself before others disrupt things for you. And there's any number of examples where that's sort of happened. If you look at the photo developing industry, used to take your film to the photo shop and then come back with your photos. Well, that all changed with obviously with the advent of mobile phones and digital video stores. So the lesson there is and probably Sarah made this point while we were over there, that nothing that these speakers spoke about was groundbreaking. A lot of it is just common sense, but it's the ability to take those snippets and then bring them back into your business. That is the important part. And we can sort of think about, okay, yep, let's disrupt ourselves before someone else disrupts us, or whatever the tagline might be. But the reality is, we need to embrace innovation in all its forms, and Lisa touched on it, and encourage it. And one of the things that Gary's spoken about in our office, which we have never gotten around to do, was to have some time out on a Friday, innovation hour, to talk about ways that we can innovate and improve things. And that's, that shows tremendous foresight from Gary's point of view, but it's actually then the implementation of the innovation is where it's fallen over. So, some of my notes on that from the conference is how do we make sure that we can implement ideas? And I think some of the ways to do that is for an idea to get from the innovation hour to becoming part of the way we do things, we've got to have a think about what our core principles might be in whether or not we pursue an idea. And for me, and in our business, it's about, does this help us get the right people doing the right work? If we can tick that box, that's a tick. Does it enhance the client experience, or does it not diminish the client experience? So, it's all well and good for us to say we want to innovate and do this, but if it's at the expense of the client experience, then we might need to look at a different way of doing it. Is it safe? For us, confidentiality and security of data is really important. So we've, as I said in Lisa's earlier discussion, we've been talking about being involved in the AI projects. That's a really big, important piece for us. Is it safe? And finally, is it going to benefit more than, say, 75% of the team? We know that if we go into, have an idea and look to roll it out, if our expectations are that it's going to make 100% of the team's life easier, then that's probably never going to happen. But we need to get some sort of critical mass. So that was one of the things that I thought about while we were away, is to sort of create some structure around innovation on that front. I spoke a little bit in that about the customer experience, and we had a speaker talk to us about that.
Yeah, we did. His name was Jason Bradshaw. He calls himself a sex expert. Now, that is CEX for everyone watching. So his bio reads that 30% of clients will leave a business just after one bad experience. To help you improve client satisfaction and retention, globally recognised customer experience strategist Jason Bradshaw reveals key moments that make or break client loyalty. And you can turn your simple interactions into lasting relationships. Jason was a really great speaker. He really talked to a lot of things that resonated with me. One of the quotes that he said, which we've talked about since, is the standard you walk past is the standard that you accept. I think that's really important to acknowledge, just as we're going through our day-to-day life every day, is that when we walk past something and we see something that we wouldn't normally do ourselves, we actually are, without actioning anything, we're accepting that behaviour. And then that's actually how we're behaving as a result. He told some interesting stories about taking a group of corporate people to Disneyland. $700,000 trip with 40 people, or to the greatest place on the world, Magical Place. And most of them said, interestingly enough to him, the most common comment was, why is it so clean here? Everyone made a comment that there's just no rubbish. Like, how is it possible? Don't see people running around sweeping the streets. There's just no rubbish. And the really came down to is that Disney had built a practice of having these employee principals that they all knew their role, and their role was to keep Disneyland as magical as possible, and that involved everyone from the top leaders to the everyday workers on the ground, is that everyone was responsible for maintaining it. So it wasn't one person's job. It wasn't 50 janitors running around all day long. It was actually from the top to the bottom. If there was rubbish on the floor, everyone showed up.
And it was interesting how he framed that, because Disneyland, the most magical place on earth, I think is what they say. And how can it be magical if there's rubbish on the ground? We don't have, our picture of perfect doesn't include rubbish. And I think it was Walt Disney himself who was sat in the park and was witnessing people's behaviour, and the guests at the park were dropping rubbish. And so what his first plan of attack was to create an environment where it was more convenient for them to put the rubbish in the bins. So they have bins every 20 or 30 metres, so it's actually easy for people to put their rubbish away. So that was the first part, but the second part that Lisa touched on was their tour guide was taking the group through the park, and she was doing her thing, talking about the attractions and the history and all that. But as she walked past a piece of rubbish on the floor, she just quietly leant over, picked it up, put it in the bin without breaking the tour. She kept talking, kept going about her day-to-day work, but just saw the rubbish, picked it down, picked it up, put it in the bin, and kept going.
It's like nothing happened.
And it was like nothing happened. And that goes part to the quote. That's the standard that they have. And I think, when we're doing work, when we see things in the office, it's easy to walk past things. Mm-hmm. But as leaders, when we walk past something, that becomes the standard we accept. And that's really challenging, because it can be confronting. We have to tell the truth a lot of times, and it's hard to do. But that's, as leaders, what we need to be mindful of.
What was interesting about it was, when he came on talking about the customer experience, I thought, okay, we're going to hear about what customers want, but it was actually the opposite of that.
What you
It was
can give
about
customers and
what the
employees.
employees are responsible for giving. And he talked about how all different employees in different hotels have this little card. I can't remember what it's called. It's like an ethos or something that they stand by.
Their
And
employee
really,
principles.
yeah, it was about the company's values.
It was the Ritz-Carlton was the hotel.
Yeah, so it was about the company's values and then what the employee's responsibility is in keeping in alignment with those values to making sure that the customer experience then benefits from that. So I think that's where that standard falls into play is, we're all responsible for the customer experience.
And whether they're our customers or not. Like, it could be your customer
Exactly.
and your client, and it's still a responsibility of everyone in the office.
Yeah, and we've spoken about this before where, we are accountants and I don't even know how to answer the phone properly anymore, but I'll still do it if I need to because we're all
I did make a coffee
responsible.
yesterday for a client at the
Well
front.
done, Lisa.
Not sure it was very good.
But yeah, I think from, like you said, everyone from the top to the bottom, we're all responsible for making sure that that experience is the same all the way through.
And probably the takeaway from that is sitting back and reflecting is this the experience we want in our business for our clients and the employees?
Yeah.
And what else can we do to improve that? Is there work to be done? And the same principles apply for all our clients. If they look into their business and then they look at what do their clients want or their customers want, how do we make it easy for them? What does success look like for those customers? We can then build a business that has a lot of trust in it.
The next speaker, we don't have a quote for him, and his name is Ollie Bridge, and he spoke about us as corporate athletes, which made us feel pretty good about ourselves.
I have a quote.
But his presentation was a lot about how we prepare for work and some of the things that we need to do to perform at our best in the work environment.
So this was Ollie Bridge. So he's dedicated his life to helping individuals and teams unleash their full potential. So his career began in elite sport, working with Formula One drivers and Olympic gymnasts, where he developed his philosophy of sustainable peak performance. And now he's gone on to lead high-performing teams at BMW, Medibank. He's driven startups up to successful exits, and he served as COO of a joint ASX NASDAQ listed health tech company, giving him deep insight into balancing performance with well-being. And like I said, Ollie described us as being corporate athletes, which I think Mark was sort of shrugging his shoulders about. It's like, yeah, I fit in there. Emphasising that peak performance only exists when we look after ourselves holistically. So I think we all do it, but particularly in the corporate world, we talked about 3 different things, which was exercise, nutrition and recovery. I'll let you talk about recovery because I know you've been checking your watch every day. But so going back to exercise, we all sit at our desks basically from 9 to 5. Some of us go for a little wander at lunch, but more often than not when not. And he sort of got everyone to stand up and, if you've run 5 kilometres, stay standing. If you've run 10, stay standing. This is where I sat down. If you've run a half marathon, stay standing. You can tell me when you sat down.
Somewhere between those 2 numbers.
If you've run a marathon, stay standing. If you've run 10 marathons this year, stay standing, at which point everyone sat down.
Was there one guy?
Not
I
10.
think not 10.
Okay,
yeah.
I thought one
think
guy
he'd
was still
done
standing.
Something like 6.
Okay.
But what he was sort of saying was, if you stand up for 50% of the time, roughly 3.5 to 4 hours in your day, every day when you're at work.
Instead of sitting,
it's the equivalent of running 10 marathons. So guess who's
In a year.
getting us a stand-up desk? But yeah, so that was the exercise piece, and then the other one was just making sure that there's structure around it and making sure that you're systematically including it in your lifestyle.
And consistency is better than intensity. Is that what he said?
Intensity every time.
And again, everyone's heard this before about the importance of looking after yourself, and really it is that athletes who are playing sport go to the nth degree to prepare to perform, but us as corporate athletes don't see ourselves through the same lens. And So there are a number of simple things that we can do throughout the day to help our performance. And as Sarah mentioned, one of them is making sure we're on our feet for at least part of the day, more time. A few little exercises that certainly found their way into our training sessions with our team overseas, where we were doing some squats and other bits and pieces just to break up the day and get us moving again. But the one that resonated for me was the importance of sleep. And as Sarah mentioned, didn't realise it at the time, but I wear my watch to bed every night, and I've got 5 years of data about my sleep that I've never even looked at before. So that was a bit of an insight as to how I'm performing in that space. Sleep is the recovery piece. Sleep is important for recovery. It gives our bodies time to recharge and rebuild and prepare for the next day. So Ollie spoke a lot about those sort of things. And I think at this time of year, particularly, it has been a long year, both in the office and at home. The school year, the kids have had enough, everyone's had enough. This sort of time over the December-January period is a really good opportunity for us to recharge, but also to take some time out to look after ourselves and get that consistency. Have a routine and stick to it. So some lessons there for everyone, and maybe some New Year's resolutions that might come out of that one. The final speaker that we'll talk about today, I'll let Lisa introduce, and again, actually the first speaker at the conference.
She was actually, yeah, it really started with a bang. I was instantly very engaged after we heard Sade Zahari, I hope I've pronounced that right, speak. So Sade is a Harvard-trained leadership coach. She's known for her psychology and neuroscience-backed strategies. Her speak was about self-doubt, developing a leadership mindset, and inspiring performance in our team. So that's sort of where her story started. And she talked about agency and taking control. The quote that I have is just be a bison. So I probably should share why that quote resonated, because it doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense. So she raised the question with us, and she put up two pictures of animals, a cow and a bison, and asked us, what they were, and what the difference was, and then asked what we knew about their response mechanism to a storm rolling in. So what's the behaviour of a cow or a group of cows versus the behaviour of the bisons? And studies have shown that the cows, when a storm is coming, will either huddle together or run away from the storm. That's their natural instinct and their response, whereas the bison actually get together and charge forward. So they're actually are brave and bold, and they get to the storm faster and generally fare better in the storm for having the guts to move forward as opposed to hiding or moving backwards. I think that kind of gives you the inference that try not to put off the hard stuff. Really, there is always going to be hard stuff in our day, whether it's at home or at work, in the month, in the week. It doesn't make it any better. I mean, we all know this, but actually having that mindset, saying the quote, "Let's be bisons, let's hit the ground running."
Yeah, and I guess it's like using the storm analogy, which I thought was really good. Is that the longer you run away from the storm, the more it's going to build and grow. And the bigger impact that it's going to have on you. Whereas if you tackle the problem head on, it doesn't develop, it doesn't get as big, and you're through it out the other side quicker. So there was lots of be a bison talk as well when we're overseas. And that really, Lisa, I think you hit the nail on the head, is that you don't run away from the problem, because it's only going to get bigger and it's eventually going to catch up with you.
And I think from the leadership piece there is actually encourage others to be the bisons too. Gather them together, let's charge forward as a team, and change some people's mindsets along the way.
And one of the topics that, as part of that presentation, was around agency. And the example that was used was a design consultant, and Lisa's got her name somewhere over there, hopefully.
Yes, yeah, Paula.
And it was to do with the merger of Citibank, which is obviously a financial institution, and Travellers Insurance, which is an insurance company. So they merged in, I think, 1999 or 1998 to become Citigroup. And the board engaged a consultant to come up with the new logo for the company. So Paula was part of the meeting, and within 5 minutes she'd scribbled the logo on the back of a napkin, and she was engaged. Her fee for that engagement to create the new logo was $1.5 million, which is quite a bit of money back then. And within 5 minutes, she'd come up with effectively what became the logo. So you can imagine this started to raise some questions with the people in the room, is that we've just paid someone $1.5 million for 5 minutes worth of work. And Paula's response to that was, no, you haven't. You've paid someone $1.5 million for 35 years and 5 minutes of someone's work. And what we always struggle with this as advisors is clients we're often able to give them an answer over the phone that might take a 30-second explanation. But that's the result of, in our case, years and years of experience. And that part of it is the part that gets missed. And it applies equally to accountants or to any type of profession, whether it's a trade or a professional, some sort of professional. What we need to keep in our minds is that our clients or our customers aren't necessarily paying us for what we're doing in that moment. They're paying us for what we've learnt and an experience that we've gained over that period of time.
And the value we can provide.
And that's why it takes a plumber 5 minutes to change a washer when it takes me 3 hours to change a washer. I'm paying for that experience. And certainly as accountants, we've really struggled to convey that to clients, but also to recover that training and that investment that we put in our team for that experience. So that was probably the thing that resonated with me out of that presentation the most, because I think it's something that we struggle with a lot. But when it was sort of put in that perspective, I'm like, well, no, yes, I could answer that question about depreciation on an asset, but that's because I've had, well, let's say 25 years 25 years of building that knowledge, and ultimately that's what clients are paying for. They're not paying us for the time that we're spending on doing the exercise, they're paying us for the outcome. And if we can deliver the outcome in a short period of time, that's a reflection of our investment in ourselves over the span of our careers.
The other thing I took from Shardy, and I hope I'm saying it right, was the balcony moment. She talked about how she is actually also a competitive salsa?
Latin dancer.
And she sort of went into a room with a friend of hers, and there was all this movement happening, and there was legs and arms and spins, and she was not quite sure what was going on, and she kind of felt really quite overwhelmed.
These were her beginner days.
These were her beginner days. I think she's gone on to...
She was Australian champion.
Yeah. But so her friend said, no, it's all right. We'll take you upstairs. And this was sort of the balcony moment where she sort of looked down and she could see that the chaos she'd walked into was actually not as chaotic as she thought it was. And she could see that this couple over here were sort of doing that routine, and they were not sort of interfering with anything. And all these different things were actually all sort of making sense. But it was that taking yourself out of the chaos and looking at things from a distance and being able to piece things together in a different way, different perspective, and just seeing that things maybe are not as chaotic as they may seem, but if they are, there's a way around it as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good approach when it comes to solving problems or dealing with emotional things. Actually just, take a step back. We'll say go up to the balcony, have a look, observe from a different perspective, get an understanding of what's going on, and then go back down there and perform.
It's really easy to get in and think that it's all overwhelming, it's quite busy, and sometimes you just really need to pull yourself back out and separate yourself from it a little bit. Yeah.
Well, thanks Sarah and Lisa for joining us. We speak passionately about the speakers because, as I said, we were very grateful to be there and very grateful to hear about what they had to say. It's our obligation now to come back and impart some of that knowledge both on our team here, but more importantly, or as importantly, with our clients. And as Sarah mentioned, we've already started sharing some of these stories in our client meetings over the last couple of weeks, and we'll continue to do that in the new year. So that was only a really snapshot of a 2-day conference, and there are lots of other things that we didn't get to today, but thanks Lisa and Sarah for joining us.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for joining us for the final episode for 2025. I'm sure everyone will grab some great insights from what we learnt at the conference, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year.